Test, no? Speed API. Check, test. Check, test. Test. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1. Test.
Nice to see you. Very well. Nice to be glad you're doing. Yeah. I went down with my wife and trip
This one want me to say one? Sorry.
Not doing your job.
I'm happy.
I swear.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold her the back.
Yeah.
I'm in the screen through.
Thank you for coming. Really glad to have you. Yeah, lots to talk about.
Oh, that'd be great tonight. Yeah, I do. I would love to talk.
No, I've heard great things about you. Really
I'm quite energetic.
We love energy.
And
I work for a campaign.
I'm very mischievous. And I have a plan.
This is good. Good recipe for success.
It has been
The global stocktake is a stark reminder of the reality we face, a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all.
COP28 is our chance to urgently change the direction of travel using the global stocktake as our roadmap. We need to bring the whole of society on this journey.
As first movers and leaders, we're working together to catalyze action towards the most impactful climate solutions.
But for us all to move faster, we need political leaders and policymakers to provide more policy incentives that implement zero emissions.
The future we are choosing is pollution-free and transforming all our systems that drive the real economy.
In fact, change is happening faster than we think.
We've seen exponential progress in clean energy technologies, and electric vehicles could account for 2/3 of car sales by 2030.
With over 12,500 members in the Race to Zero, businesses, investors, cities, regions, and others
are leading the way to halving emissions by 2030 and are already turning their climate pledges into plans.
We are on our way to actually deliver to the 6.5 billion euro investment goal into renewable energy.
The world will fail to achieve a just and green transition without sufficient, efficient, and fair flows of finance, particularly in developing countries.
And we must remember that in pursuit of a net zero resilient world, we should put people and nature first.
We, as business leaders, are aligning our advocacy with net zero goals.
And we're changing our business models. Of the world's largest 2,000 publicly listed companies, half have set 2050 net zero targets.
We as finance leaders are supporting governments to turbocharge the transition.
For example, sustainable bond issuance has totaled $109 billion so far in 2023, higher than full-year issuance in any other year on record.
私たちは都市や地域のリーダーとして地域の気候行動を実現する革新的な政策を実行しております。京都市は2030年民生部門
In my city, we have successfully adopted climate actions almost 20 years. We have switched to 100% electricity from renewable sources for all of our operations.
We don't have time to wait. Later is too late.
We are ready to support ambitious policy incentives and work in collaboration with governments on national climate action plans due in 2025.
We are calling on you, political leaders,
for courageous leadership at COP28.
Kia ora koutou, hello from my native language in New Zealand. I'm Tessa Vincent, Policy and Engagement Lead for the Race to Zero campaign. And Race to Zero is the world's largest alliance of non-state actors, so businesses, financial institutions, cities, states, regions, hospitals, universities, committed to halving emissions by 2030. And it's a pleasure to welcome you today to, I think, one of the most important event topics that is happening at COP28, how you can be climate policy leaders. So we are joined by many organisations on this screen in this effort to align policy engagement with net zero goals. And today we have two fantastic panels moderated by InfluenceMap and We Mean Business Coalition, and a very special keynote who I'm going to introduce to the stage. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. So Sheldon Whitehouse represents Rhode Island in the United States Senate, where he is fighting to position America as a leader in the clean energy economy and to protect the ocean state from the consequences of climate change. As chairman of the Senate Budget Committee and a senior member of the Environment and Public Works Committee, Whitehouse takes on the fossil fuel industry and spearheads policies combating the climate crisis and strengthening environmental protections. And we hear that Senator Whitehouse isn't afraid of some controversial statements. We're looking forward to what he has to say on this very important topic of climate policy engagement. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you so much, Tessa. Wonderful to be with you all. Much appreciation to InfluenceMap and to Ceres and to the We Mean Business Coalition for focusing on the problem that is behind the problem of climate change. The problem of climate change is a problem of physics. It's a problem of carbon emissions and methane emissions and their concentration in the atmosphere and the effects that that has on our planet. But if you look at the reason we're failing so catastrophically at solving that problem of emissions and physics, you have to go back to politics. And you have to look at a different kind of pollution. Not the pollution of methane and carbon emissions into the atmosphere, but the pollution of dark money and improper influence and manipulation by special interests into our democracy. This is a global gathering, and I can't speak to the global situation, but as a member of the Senate since 2007, I can speak very clearly to the situation in the United States. We were bipartisan on climate until 2010. 3 solid years of good bipartisan work ended bang in January of 2010 when the Supreme Court, a new Supreme Court, opened the doors to unlimited corporate special interest money in American politics, and the fossil fuel industry instantly deployed its forces to shut down any Republican support on climate. We went from bipartisanship on climate to partisanship on climate overnight. And ever since then, I have been fighting the fossil fuel industry's efforts to corrupt our politics. It happens directly through their funding, which they hide through a whole enormous archipelago of front groups and screens. There's a group called Donors Trust, whose only purpose is to launder the identity off a gift so that it shows up as Donors Trust and not a fossil fuel industry source. So the public is left absolutely in the dark about who's really behind all the spending. Things like super PACs didn't used to exist before Citizens United, and now they're an absolutely menacing force against climate change. And the power of that money has allowed the fossil fuel industry to intrude into formerly regular organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and turn trade associations into weapons against climate action. Because of its power, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is probably my most malevolent enemy at trying to get things done on climate. So an enormous political operation has been deployed through new front groups, through funding screeners, through super PACs, through all sorts of forms of political influence, including trade associations. You really can't find a good American trade association on climate. You look at the Insurance Association, they're writing enormous checks for climate damages, but what do they have to say about climate? Nothing. You look at the Bankers Association, which is looking at a collapse in coastal property values and huge impact on mortgage markets. And what does the Bankers Association have to say about climate? Essentially nothing. And I've already mentioned the Chamber and its nefarious role. So if we're going to solve the climate problem, it is incredibly important to first solve the corruption problem. And if we solve that corruption problem, not only will that change the world better on climate, but it will change the world for better on a great number of other issues where special interest power really needs to be pushed back on by the voices of real people who are facing real problems that politicians can't address because of too much unbridled, secret corporate power. So thank you for your work to put that spotlight on this body. This is my 6th COP. I'm a little tired of going to COPs and having nothing serious change. I'm a little bit tired of coming to COPs and seeing methane rates continue higher, CO2 rates in the atmosphere continue higher. There is an underlying condition that makes COPs a failure. And I particularly want to thank the corporate presences that are here, because from inside, from corporate America, is where you're going to get the change in the trade associations that turns them from enemies of climate action to friends of climate action. Thank you very much. Good luck. This is important.
Enemies into friends, very much looking forward to discussing these topics with trade associations and direct climate policy engagement. So I would like to invite Andrew Pragg from We Mean Business Coalition, if I can spot him, there he is, to introduce your panel.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I just managed to squeeze through the door in order to come and moderate the panel too. Tremendous to see so mane people here. And a huge thanks to Senator Whitehouse for his very inspiring address. I'd please invite the panel to come up, sit with me here, to Takajiro, Helen, and Timotei, who I didn't see yet. He's there, okay.
We go backwards?
Okay. Yeah, whichever order you like. We're going to follow up on those very stark and inspiring words from the Senator, with a discussion to get into a bit of detail on really what companies are doing and what they can do more of to improve their policy engagement and their advocacy in line with their climate goals. So just to begin myself, so I'm Andrew Pragg, Managing Director for Policy at the We Mean Business Coalition. So we are co-hosting this pavilion. Welcome. I'm glad you managed to find it. And it's really, again, tremendous to see so many people here. Thank you very much to all the partners, including Race to Zero, for putting on this particular event. What we are as the coalition is we're actually an NGO working with the world's most influential businesses to push more action on climate change, really carving out the most ambitious part of the business sector and getting that voice heard in policy-making circles and providing guidance to those companies. We were founded by 7 existing business associations about 10 years ago before the Paris Agreement, and now we work from there internationally with many partners to always push more action on climate, get that voice heard in the policy-making circles. One of the areas we've been working on the last few years is on responsible policy engagement, recognizing how important that is, as the Senator made very clear, how important that is for companies to be very coherent in their action. Our work on climate change is framed around what we call the 4 A's of climate action, or of climate initiatives by companies. So it's about ambition, setting the target. It's about action, doing things, implementing steps towards achieving that target. It's about accountability, showing what you're doing and reporting on it. And it's about advocacy, and that's where this comes in. It's about making sure that the voice is heard and make in policy circles, and about making sure that it's aligned and not pushing in the wrong direction. So to that end, we put out this year still, 5th feels like last year, but a framework for responsible policy engagement by companies, which really goes through some of the steps that companies can take. It really lays out the business case for better engagement. It's about getting them to speak up, just to put this issue on the table, making sure that that voice gets heard in the right circles, making sure that trade associations are aligned, again, as the Senator made clear reference to, making sure that it is properly resourced and there's spending within the company and that spending is transparently disclosed and that the whole advocacy strategy is disclosed. So a number of steps which we put forward. I'm very happy to have the panel here to hear about what they've been doing to improve what's going on within their companies and more broadly. So let's turn to the panel. I begin with very honored to have Takejiro Tsuyoshi here, who is representative of the Japan Climate Initiative, who has an extremely distinguished career in driving for more corporate action on climate change in Japan. He has been a special advisor to the UNEP-FI. He's been on council advising more than one Japanese prime minister, if I understand, in the past. He's established the Green Finance Initiative in Japan and is now representative of the Japan Climate Initiative. So Takejiro, maybe please could you tell us what is in fact the Japan Climate Initiative, and how have you been helping companies to take better steps to be more aligned on their policy engagement and on their advocacy?
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to share the activities of Japan Climate Initiative (JCI) with you all. And I'm sorry for this picture. This picture is disguising my age. I used to be young as you. I got two questions. First question is what the JCI is. I and my group launched the JCI on July 6, 2018, 5 years ago, with 105 members, non-state actors, to realize the decarbonized society in Japan and also in the world as well. With the steady growth, as of today, JCI has 800 members, big growth. And JCI has become the largest network of non-state actors in Japan addressing climate change. Members of JCI are Tokyo Met Government, Kyoto City, you saw Mayor of Kyoto City, Yokohama City, and many companies, large companies from internationally doing business to small and medium-sized companies in Japan, NGOs, and others. JCI has three reasons. First, to respond to the increasing role of non-state actors in realizing the goal of the Paris Agreement. Second, to create a level playing field for Japanese non-state actors. Ambitious actions taken by progressive JCI members and the local government should receive fair recognition both in and outside of Japan, not impacted negatively by rather poor Japanese national policy. Third, to tap the advocacy power of NSAs to the central government. That is what the JCI is. And your second question was what steps have taken by us. Every year we have organized a large action summit event by inviting leading speakers from Japan and also abroad. Periodically, JCI made many reports on very important matters on the time of important developments has taken in and out of Japan. From time to time, on a critical moment, such as the Japanese government would finalize the net zero policy, we carried one full page sized opinion letter on nationally described newspapers, such as Nikkei. This is Japan's version of Wall Street Journal, by expressing our own opinions, not only directly to the government, also to Japanese society as well. After 5 years since JCI's launch, JCI has been supporting JCI's non-state actors to break traditional Japanese corporate cultures. That is, they do not openly express their opinions against Japanese government. After 5 years, we have broken this traditional Japanese corporate culture to express their opinions openly with their face visible and with their names visible, recognized. JCI has become a platform where global level discussion is being taken openly. I think JCI has become a cornerstone of a very strong ambition loop between Japanese government and the private sectors. This is what we have done in the past 5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your responses. Really interesting to hear. Very interesting to hear everything you've been doing. Such an important role, that cultural aspect of really changing Japanese corporate culture to be speaking out to the government and then identifying the moment. So we'll come back to you if there's time to talk more about the trade association.
I forgot one important news.
Yeah.
On December 5th, at this COP28, we send a letter to Prime Minister Kishida and the other 5 ministers in Japan to change its national policy to be more aggressive.
That's fantastic. Very important work for the world and for Japan, so thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to Helen, here, standing next to me, who is Helen Walter-Tirononi, who is the Director of Global Climate Policy, is that right? Yeah. For Train Technologies, really interesting company, very strongly oriented towards sustainability, with as I understand it, a strong US base, but also European headquarters. So just understand more about what you've been doing to, in such a diverse company, to make sure that your policy engagement around the world is aligned with this strong sustainability culture.
So we are probably the best kept secret in this space. We didn't even know we were in this space. We didn't know there was this space to be in. Yeah, thank you. In case you don't know what Train Technologies is, Train Technologies is the largest supplier of heating and cooling in the world. If you ate something today, there's a 60% chance or more that it was shipped if it was fresh or frozen in a Thermo King container. We also make, we kind of looked at the space around decarbonization and we said, oh, this is kind of the temperatures that we know how to do. We went out and said, oh, we're going to stretch those temperatures and work on vaccine and pharmaceutical processing and industrial processing and kind of expand that range of success. So we try to kind of show folks what's possible. From a climate policy perspective, that's my day job, right, all day. I kind of strategize this way. We advance, we defend, and we enable climate policy. Climate technology. So advance, I think, is pretty clear. Renewable energy and other things like that. Things that my competitors are not thinking about. We are spending time on trying to promote policies to enable renewable energy, permit reform, those sorts of things. We defend. You all don't see the duck feet moving under the water. We've got somebody in our group that works probably half time on writing topping letters to agencies to counter lousy comments from trade associations or from competitors. So they say, don't advance this energy efficiency policy or don't do this other thing or electrification. And we say, yes, do that thing. Enabling, I can't even tell you how many years I'm owed back working on building codes to enable low global warming potential refrigerants, or enabling heating chillers, so electric chillers. So that's kind of our strategy and how we think about things. From a trade association perspective, specifically, we fire them if we can't overcome through comments, kind of these topping comments that we spend so much time writing. If we can't influence them from inside, we keep trying, but if we can't get there, we fire them. So, we quit. So those are the kind of things that we think about when we think about policy.
Yeah. Super interesting there, and interesting to split into those three categories.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned it on the trade association point, we've been having some fascinating discussions here. And you say you fire them.
Yeah.
Great. But what I'm interested in is how far do you push them, or how long do you stay in the tent to try to influence before you say enough is enough, we're out? So it's obviously a difficult balance to strike.
For me, an irritating amount of time, because we have to write all those topping letters. But probably the young person that does that, it'd be even more irritating. But it depends. It depends. We get a lot of good information. We get the inside scoop of what they're up to, by being in. But we don't want them running around saying we represent. We're a big company. We don't want them running around saying we represent the industry when they're not representing our perspective. So it's really a balance, and it's we're having some difficult conversations inside right now about a couple trade associations. We've fired a couple in the last couple of years, but yeah.
Very interesting and a difficult challenge, but an important one. We could talk about that much more, but I want to bring in Timothée. He's waiting patiently there because we don't have much time. So Timothée Messe-Dubois, who is head of institutional affairs for Schneider Electric, based in near Paris, in France. So a similar kind of question for you. Now, as a European company, but with international operations, how do you, from a headquarters in Europe, how do you work to keep things aligned across such a big group and always pushing in the right direction on climate policy engagement in the countries you operate in?
Thanks a lot, Andrew. First of all, for the one who may not know Schneider Electric is a global leader in energy management and industrial automation. So our key message towards the public bodies is quite clear, that electrification plus digitization can lead to sustainability. And second message is that the solutions already exist. And we have 150,000 employees in the world. First of all, to align climate advocacy, we need to align internally, and we need to base our advocacy on scientific targets. So this is why we were certified by SBTi, the new corporate net zero standard in 2021, one of the first company. So we have this target, net zero carbon neutral target, net zero target. So it's really important to align internally from the US, EU, all over the world, to align on this scientific target. Then we need to ensure that we have a new trust charter in Schneider Electric, written and published in 2021. So we need to ensure that the lobbying advocacy is the same all over the world. So we ensure that we don't finance any political party, which is forbidden by the trust charter. We don't engage in political party. So this is really important. Then we need to report, we need to disclose, and then to this aim we need to collect the data about climate advocacy, about lobbying. And this is very complicated because we don't have the same definition at all. So we have built, and this is why I have my paper here, because it's a very new definition that was adopted internally. So we have told ourselves that lobbying and the scope of lobbying today was this one. Lobbying is concentrated efforts, actions, and other public affairs activities in any oral or written form carried out by a legal representative or a public affairs professional with the intent to promote, oppose, or influence decision-making by government authorities and elected representatives, as well as policy and legislation formulation, modification, implementation, or annulment. So this is, it was quite complicated because the definition from the US to the EU to the France really differ from a country to another. And then once we have all this definition, we can disclose, and from 2019 to 2020, we disclose in our universal registration document, we disclose our lobbying activities and our expenses towards trade associations, think tank, and business associations.
Very interesting, thank you. And yeah, it seems you're taking a lot of the steps as is trained that align with what I referred to in our framework at the beginning of what companies can do. So that maybe just a couple of quick follow-ups. So that trust charter is a very interesting idea. So is that available publicly? Is one question, and is that something that the company sort of communicates on, or is that held internally? And secondly, given that there is that trust charter and that definition, and I understand that you had to pick up a piece of paper to read out the definition because it's obviously very complicated, which, as you say, highlights how difficult this area is, and the difference. What's advocacy? What's lobbying? These things really matter, particularly in the United States, and what do you do about sort of building the capacity and the sort of training within the company to make sure that all those, I think the word was legal representatives, actually know that it exists and then operate it in practice?
Our trust charter is available publicly available. It was like a new document. It was downloaded almost 20,000 times internally. It was translated in 30 foreign languages so that everyone has the same information. It's not only about lobbying, it's also about the link with top communities, the link with investors, the link with everyone in the world. So and we have a lot of internal trainings, like mandatory trainings about anti-corruption and lobbying activities.
Okay, it's interesting. I'd love to find out more, but we're going to run out of time. And I want to bring Takajiro again, in particular on this question of influencing trade associations in Japan, and also, if you want to add something else, please go ahead.
Very shortly, whatever we are going to do to address climate change activity has become a survival game. Which country, which industry, which area, which society will be surviving in the 21st century. So we should not forget this point. On the surface, it is very beautiful to save the planet. But the other side is death match. Who will be surviving in coming years?
No, thank you. Very important to remind ourselves just how serious the challenge is and the important role that all of us play, in many corporates in this room and others in addressing that challenge and in making sure governments take action, which is partly why we're all here in Dubai to influence the negotiations that are going on there. Just before we close, actually, on that point, I think it'd be interesting to ask the panel if they have any views on the key question here internationally is this question of phasing out fossil fuels and how do we get that word into the text? Very quickly, where do you think there's a role for company advocacy, lobbying in that particular question on fossil fuels? Or anyone who wants to speak to that?
As I told you, any kind of business, any size of business is covered by the network of supply chain. So no single company can escape from this pressure. So this is a national matter, but also global matter.
No, sure.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
Go in.
No, I was just going to say, as I think about this, we sign on the pledge and all that jazz, right? But there's more to it than just signing a pledge, right? I'm a little tired of signing pledges because we need action, right? And I think that if we can't do it globally, do it nationally, right? If we can't do it nationally, do it in a state or a province. If we can't do it there, we do it in a city, right? So don't give up, don't get mad, just keep going, right? That's kind of how I think about this.
Right. No, it's a great sort of positive attitude and finding the right level. So it's great to have these international viewpoints here to
I never lose.
Right. I can believe it. So
It'll take a while.
Maybe, I know we have to move on to the next panel. Maybe see if there's one question that anyone wants to fire at this panel before we move on to the next one, or just check if there's anyone. If not, go ahead.
A few comments on the phasing out of fossil fuel. We need to provide solutions. We need to provide solutions. Private companies need to provide solutions to decarbonize. In Schneider, we have the so-called Zero Carbon Project, which is like a huge program to help our suppliers, top-tier suppliers, to decarbonize. to halve their emissions by 2025, reduced by 50%. We can help also our customers to decarbonize, to avoid, like, our objective is to avoid 800 million tons of CO2 by 2025. So yes, we really need to be solutions oriented to phase out fossil fuel.
Yeah, no, thank you for putting that forward so clearly. I think at that point we need to move on to the next panel, so I'll hand back to you, Tessa, to do the handover. So thank you very much for this excellent panel, really inspiring to hear these international views.
Thank you very much to the panelists and Andrew. I'd now like to invite Dylan Tanner, CEO and founder of InfluenceMap, for our next topic. We're on trade associations. How can corporate climate leaders manage their industry associations around policy engagement, and how can this be scaled up?
Maybe sit here, and someone can sit here, and I'll stand at the podium. Is this on? Hi, everyone. Hi, welcome to the second panel. I'm Dylan Tanner of InfluenceMap. I strongly concur with the Senator's rousing rallying call there. We provide the data and analysis behind a lot of what he said, and I can say trade associations represent the single biggest blockage to policy action on climate change, and they have done so for the last decade, 2 decades or so. And just imagine that if the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, who represent the entire corporate America, Business Europe, the Japan Business Federation, had all been behind what their members were pledging 10 years ago on climate, we'd be in a very different situation today on our pathway towards 1.5C, or whatever that's going to be. So this is a key blockage. One objective of InfluenceMap is to measure this stuff, and also bring some of these trade associations whose names are acronyms with little accountability, little transparency into the open, and make them accountable to their members and to society for the pivotal role they have, not just in climate, as the Senator mentioned, but in many, many different areas where policy overlaps with economic interests. And so the Senator focused on the United States, and its politics and trade groups are very divisive, as you know. This can be seen in different dynamics around the world. Not by deliberate, but I think we have a purely European panel here today, and here the situation is much more positive. And we've invited 4 people whose day job it is to advocate positively on climate change. So I've asked them within this to stick very closely to the issue of the trade association problem and how it can be resolved. So hopefully within 20 minutes we'll have got some resolution there. Okay. So are you all going to stand? Is that good? You happy there? Okay. Great. So first off, I'm going to ask Fiona Duggan, Global Sustainability Senior Manager for Climate Advocacy at Unilever. Fiona, your company has demonstrated climate policy engagement leadership, which we measure, and it's been highly vocal on trade association misalignment and publicly taken some actions around this, and over a period of years. So talk us through your journey around that and message for peer corporations around the world who maybe are not as ambitious as you on this topic.
Can everybody hear me? You can. Okay, good. Well, as you know, Unilever is a global business. We operate in over 200 countries and 400 brands, so it's quite big. But as a result of it being very big, our policy teams on the ground have to work on quite a wide range of issues. So everything from health to diet to food to customs to supply chain. It's pretty vast and wide. So we have to prioritize, and we have to prioritize within our climate advocacy as well, because we can't do everything internally. So we need to work with trade associations. But obviously the challenge there lies, which is how do we make sure that the trade associations are aligned with our agenda, and how do we make sure that we can keep those trade associations to account, which is vitally important. So what we do is we're currently undertaking a review of our trade associations, and we're very much tagging closely to InfluenceMap's methodology. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, what are the trade associations that are misaligned? And what are the trade associations that may not be misaligned, but actually have quite a low engagement? We're going to work with them. We're going to work with them on we're going to work with them on practical, realistic actions. And we're going to say, we're going to come back next year and we're going to track this again. Now, we think that being a critical friend on the inside will be useful and helpful, but we need to test that theory. So we need to say, next year, have you made changes? What's happened? And if not, we will have a conversation and we will see what our future relationship with those trade associations are, and we'll have to be very clear about how they do or don't represent us. And I would say our message to our peers is, as I said, we find InfluenceMap's work and methodology incredibly helpful and incredibly useful, and we're using that in our review. But I think lots of different corporates are also doing this type of reviews as well, and they all have slightly different methodologies that they're employing. So what we need is a common understanding of what good looks like. We need a common understanding of what a good review looks like, because then if we go to a trade association, we say, you're doing this incorrectly, we want you to move ahead with this way. They also get a phone call for someone else the next day saying the same thing. It goes up the chain rapidly. So that would be very helpful for us. So that's my peer message, Dylan. Yeah.
Thank you, great. And I didn't ask her to pitch InfluenceMap there. One reason we do this is we want to generate more disclosure and honesty from companies and trade associations around what they're doing. So next, we're going to move on to Iberdrola. Miguel, who is the Climate Policy Advocacy Lead, and delighted to have you. So again, we measure Iberdrola as a climate policy leader, and an ambitious and clear regulatory framework appears to be crucial to your business. And this is why we've scored you as such. So you're not doing it out of fun, you're doing it for your business needs. And I'd want to drill down to, you've been closely involved in your main trade association in Europe, Eurelectric, over the last decade, which we've tracked has been somewhat of a middling trade association to one of the driving forces behind the Fit for 55. So talk us through that journey and how you've the dynamics within that group and how you've managed that and how you've driven ambition out of them.
Thank you very much, Dylan, for this interesting question. In fact, as you say, Eurelectric is one of the key organizations to drive especially electrification as a source of decarbonization in Europe. So we have been really involved for more than 20 years in this organization. We have identified a very positive evolution in terms of climate ambition and alignment with Paris Agreement, especially in the role after the Green Deal approval. The Green Deal approval, you know, is an overall strategy of green growth for Europe, and one of the special milestones of this Green Deal is the Fit for 55 package. It's a package to meet the 55% emission reduction target in Europe by 2030. And Eurelectric has developed a quite intense activity there, not only providing positive feedback and advocacy in some of the key files, but also creating internally very interesting task force and groups to work on the different advocacy pieces and campaigns. We as Iberdrola are devoting quite amount of important resources there. More than between 15 or 20 professionals are joining different groups, chairing different task force. For example, we chair the task force on electrification and energy efficiency. We are co-chairing the Committee on Electrification and Renewables. So we are deeply involved. We think that is very important if you want to align an association with the Paris Agreement, to be day by day working very closely, drafting, very involved in the working groups, not only at high level, it is important, at the committees, at the boards, but also at technical level, providing detailed input, and when you are not comfortable with a drafting, you have to flag that it is not adequate, you have to push, you have to work hours and hours, providing the inputs that you need to feel comfortable with the tests. You have to work every day. It is not something to be one day. You have to be every day in the task force on the ground.
Great, thanks. On that, well, actually, I will move on to the next speaker and pick up on a point later. But delighted to have a representative of Eurelectric here today, Anne Bolle, I got that right, who is the chair of Eurelectric's Competitiveness Working Group. And I imagine you two know each other quite well. So you're representing Eurelectric at this COP, a very powerful trade group that we measure as being highly positive and engaged on climate policy, and likely a major catalyst for Europe's climate policy trajectory, which we hope continues to be positive. We also understand that Eurelectric has been highly active in the last few years, convincing other European trade groups to move forward on climate policy, and in other words, bringing other sectors with you. So talk to us about this journey, in particular, how you manage members, because you're a federation and you have national trade association members, how you manage members who don't want to move at this speed, perhaps from some countries and regions that still have strong fossil fuel reliance.
Thank you, Dylan. I apologize for my voice, but I hope that you can understand me. I'm about to lose it. I represent Norway, the Norwegian Electricity Association, and Eurelectric and Statkraft as a company. Statkraft is the largest renewable producer in Europe and committed to only invest into renewables, so we kind of lead by example. The European power sector is on a pathway towards net zero electricity mix by 2040. And we expect that, and thus...
Close your mic to your voice.
Like that? Better? Thus offering other sectors a way to decarbonize, mainly through electrification. And that is why we regularly involve and engage with the other sectors, those to be electrified, mainly the transport sector, but also the industry sector and the housing sector, because we need to build trust and we need to understand their challenges and find solutions on how we can jointly solve the issues. But we also engage with like-minded associations through the Electrification Alliance, among others, where we together with those associations for solar, wind, grids and heat pumps promote the value of electrification and provide a manifesto for the EU elections where we call for a 35 electrification target in the EU by 2030. We call also for an electrification indicator to be integrated into the national energy and climate plans so that we can monitor on how that evolves and how we go towards electrification. And then we call for concrete action and to enable electrifications through grids, skills, financing, and concrete actions towards customers. So that is how we work together with the other association. It's a joint problem, and we need a joint effort, and we need to build trust with those being affected and those to be decarbonized. So we build a narrative also around electricity as an efficient fuel, and over time providing lower prices when we have a more renewable energy mix. How do we get all the electricity, all the members in Eurelectric on board was the other question. And well, that's a bit like negotiations, like what we are doing here, because they're different points of departure. And we need also there to understand everybody's realities. They're different energy mixes. Some can move faster, some can move slower, some have less money, some have more money. We need to bring them together. And I've been leading the working group Climate Change for 6 years while we negotiated the ETS. And then talking to every member, trying to find solutions, what we also do in the other working groups, and Iberdrola knows very well all about that. We try to find the good arguments. We try to find solutions also when we are more ambitious, to also see where those who, to start with, could not be that ambitious, could get some help, how to incentivize that, how to form policy instruments also to get that help and to get more financing for that. All members in Eurelectric have signed up to carbon neutrality well before 2050, and all agree upon electrification as a very important way to get there. So that is how we work.
That's great, thanks. Just one question for you. So, in your efforts to get other sectors in Europe to move ahead on the climate, I guess, electrification agenda, which ones were most reluctant and which ones were easiest to convince in that? And be diplomatic, of course.
I think it's always something with how difficult it is for a sector to decarbonize. And those who are easier to decarbonize, where you see the solutions around, they're easier to convince as well. Those who are more difficult to convince. But we're working on it.
Okay, great. I didn't think you would name names. Great. So moving on to our final panelist, Heather Buchanan, who's Chief Executive Officer of Bankers for Net Zero. Heather, a solution to inactive or regressive industry associations on climate is often to establish an alternative voice for progressive companies to channel their ambitions on climate policy. Maybe I want to say not regressive, but inactive in this case, but that's up to you to talk through. So talk us through your journey so far, and also touch upon your relationship with the mainstream financial and banking industry associations, which clearly have a lot more resources than you may have.
Yes, they certainly do. That's a guarantee. So thank you very much, Heather Buchanan. I co-founded Bankers for Net Zero in the lead up to COP26. It was supposed to be a one-off project where we wanted to sit and look at that kind of policy intersection between where banks were kind of being pushed in terms of just starting to get on with commitments to net zero and stuff, and also what that meant for their relationship with their customers. So we're very, very focused on the kind of impact of finance in the real economy and how we get the right kind of regulatory and legislative structure in place to do that. Obviously, 1 year turned into 2 years because of COVID. During that time, we were really engaged. And I'd have to say COP26 was a pivotal point, certainly for our members and for business, because of the race to zero. I mean, the way that they brought everything together and gave everybody kind of a focal point has absolutely changed the game. There's a lot more clarity. There's been a lot of working out where people need to go, as it were, but we've found that the levels of engagement quite good. So we are also accelerators for Race to Zero. All of our members have to have either kind of signed up to the Net Zero Banking Alliance or be in the process of making those commitments. So we do ask our members, they can't just show up, they need to be working actively towards things. I would say that, interestingly, the banks that don't sign up to us, it's often not because they don't want to, but because they feel like they're still getting their own house in order and they're not ready to put their kind of heads above the parapet. We work really closely with all the trade bodies in the UK, in mainstream as well. We can definitely, to a certain extent, they can only go as fast as their slowest member. And we kind of guarantee that, likewise, we can only go as fast as our kind of slowest membership. But we're not just banks. We get businesses involved. We've got NGOs, E3G, WWF. We get academia. We work really closely kind of with government along the way, and it gives us that ability to kind of push much harder. I mean, I would say kind of 2 years on now that we're from the first commitments that were made, we're actually getting to the point now where the businesses and banks are actually pushing government much harder for more clarity and action. So that's, I think a positive story. And I would also just mention, because I know it's a huge issue in the States, but I've had the chief executives of our main regulators for competitions and markets and financial regulators actually contact us and say, listen, if anybody tries to hide behind anti-competitiveness or antitrust issues, send them to us. We won't be seen as, be a blocker for progress. So I think we've got a nice, strong mandate that we can work with. And it creates the opportunities. And I think just that my last kind of comment, particularly on the financial sector, banks and institutions have committed to decarbonising their financed emissions by 2050. It's a really elegant, simple line. But actually what it means is they're on the hook for literally every overdraft, every mortgage, every small business loan, every corporate loan, and their entire supply chain. And so it's an immensely complex thing. But what it's done is, and this is kind of where we kind of put these on top. 5 years ago, financial institutions, when they're talking about lobbying, it was just about regulation and legislation that might affect them and the bottom line. Now they're really getting actively engaged in all sorts of policy areas where everybody's really worried about retrofitting because we've got, in the UK, because we've got the oldest housing stock. It's one of the main contributors for greenhouse emissions. And of course, everybody that's got a mortgage, all of a sudden, and that's the bedrock of a lot of financial institutions. So I think what we're kind of doing, even more than just looking at the general policy, is looking at the way that we can use essentially what's quite a powerful lobby, the financial services industry, and get them together to kind of push harder in the right direction.
That's great. That's an amazing story about how a startup, a single-focused startup, can give maybe the members of a largely reticent, inactive sector another voice and allow them to step up when their main trade association can't. So maybe that's a model for other of the so-called absent sectors in the economy who are not currently advocating much on climate. What wonderful stuff. So I guess from this panel and the previous panel, there are a number of tactics that can be deployed to manage a trade association issue. Escalation tactics, firing your trade association, as Helen puts it. Robust disclosure and review, which I hope a lot of companies are doing here. And so this I think needs to be ramped up and escalated and pushed through the corporate sector. I've asked the panelists to close with, as leaders in this topic, one final message to their peer companies on what they can do today or tomorrow on this topic. Starting with you, and then.
Thank you. I think you have to engage very robustly with the association. You have to be part at the core of the association, understand well, and if you are not convinced or you are not aligned, in the long term, you will have to make a decision.
I agree with the engagement. So engage, be constructive, think possibilities, and lead by example. This is a larger project which goes beyond your own company's interests.
That was a good one, actually. I would say make sure you do a corporate review, make sure you do it well, make sure you've got very clear actions, and make sure the trade associations understand you can work constructively with them, but also to make sure that there will be consequences as well.
Obviously, my message will be slightly different, which is, but I mean, we do work really closely with our trade associations and other trade associations, but it's very recognised that we can kind of speak in stronger terms than they can and often be a bit bolder. And so we're able to kind of work together on that thing. So I think, as you say, having multiple voices is a positive thing and, gets a bit more of a race to the top going.
Join me in thanking this amazing panel.
Thank you so much to our panelists, our amazing speakers today. We just want to close briefly by giving you some confidence in the room to take this further. So in June this year, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions issued a call to action for all non-state actors to align their climate advocacy with net zero goals. And we've been really pleased as a campaign to see a high level of activity happening ahead of COP28 on this topic of climate policy engagement. And you can see on this slide here, from energy to nature to finance and adaptation, non-state actors are really leading at COP28 in these calls for greater policy and stronger policy incentives from national and national governments. So I think with that, you can also see here, we're all about action. I know for me, it's that point of COP where you're feeling a bit exhausted. We're towards the end. What are the clear actions that are coming out of today? Well, here on the slide are a number of sign-on letters that you as a corporate in the room may want to get involved with. And just to recap what we heard from our panelists and keynote speakers. So we heard first to call out trade associations from the Senator, solving the climate problem, we need to solve corruption. We heard from Japan Climate Initiative the importance of national climate policy actions, and from train to advance, defend and enable climate policy. We heard from Schneider Electric to align your climate policy by aligning internally. From Unilever to review your trade associations, that seems like a very clear action. Iberdrola to get involved in the core of your trade association. Eurelectric to engage with like-minded associations and to lead by example. And I must sort of really acknowledge Eurelectric for being an association on our panel and speaking at this event, and to encourage, if we can encourage more, to do so. And finally, from Bankers for Net Zero, don't hide behind antitrust arguments and allow associations to speak in stronger terms. So with that, thank you very much on behalf of the Race to Zero team, and we look forward to continuing engaging with you on this topic.